All right,
Greg?
hello. How you guys doing today? My name is Greg Jesmok. I'm a current master's candidate at California State University, Northridge in the geological sciences, and also an organizer for Earth Sciences Without Borders. Um, and so today we're going to have two speakers. One is Dr. Priya Ganguli, my advisor. Priya joined the Department of Geological Sciences at California State University, Northridge in January 2018. She studies the transport and fate of contaminants in aquatic environments with a focus on the element mercury. After completing her Master's of Science in Earth Sciences from UC Santa Cruz, she worked on a variety of environmental remediation projects at the San Francisco Bay Water Quality Control Board. She then returned to UC Santa Cruz for her PhD in Earth Sciences, where she studied the influence of groundwater, seawater interaction on mercury toxicity and transport at the coastal margin. At California State University, Northridge, Dr. Ganguli is part of the new water science program where she continues to study chemical cycling at the land-sea margin, as well as questions regarding wildfire impacts on contaminant mobilization and the long-term effects of environmental remediation projects, such as the new Idria Mine Superfund site. In addition, we have Dr. Kuria Ndungu. Please correct me if I'm wrong about the pronunciation. But he received his Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Kenyatta University, Kenya, and a Master's and PhD in Analytical Chemistry from the University of Botswana and Lund University, respectively. His research centers on the biogeochemical cycling of inorganic elements, both as nutrients and pollutants in coastal and open ocean waters. And he began his current line of research as a Dreyfus Postdoctoral Research Fellow at the Institute of Marine Sciences at the University of California, Santa Cruz. After Santa Cruz, he moved to Stockholm University, where he has continued to pursue this research with a focus on the Baltic Sea and the polar regions. And now at the Norwegian Institute for Water Research, Norway's leading institute for fundamental and applied research in marine and fresh waters, where Dr. Ndungu currently works. His focus has been on the North Sea and the Arctic. Here he functions as the Geotraces Program country representative for Norway and is tipped to win the Ig Nobel Prize. Today, Kuria will be discussing shipwrecks and their potential to pollute, but we're going to start actually with Dr. Priya Ganguli. So without further ado, if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate it. So I suppose the best way is to do the screen sharing and just set it up as a presentation.
Works wonderfully, yeah.
Great. Is it showing up okay?
Yes, good.
And can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Great, okay. So as Greg mentioned, I spent several years working in doing environmental remediation work at the Regional Water Quality Control Board between my master's and my PhD. And in talking with Greg about what would interest the group the most, we thought that this project, which incorporates both scientific aspects as well as practical challenges to doing remediation work, might be a good fit. So this is going to be a talk about a wetland remediation project that I worked on. This ended up costing about $30 million over the course of several years, and it's in an area called Martinez, California. So the agency that I worked for, it was part of the California Environmental Protection Agency. And so this is an umbrella organization similar to the US EPA, but focused on the state of California to restore, protect, and enhance the environment. Also focus on public health and environmental quality and protecting waters of the state. And there are a number of different agencies that fall underneath the umbrella of California EPA. And I was working in Region 2 over here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Peyton Slough today. So just describing what a slough is, you can find sloughs in both terrestrial systems and in coastal systems. And along the West Coast, sloughs are considered these quiet backwater areas. So if you have a bay or an estuary, when you have high tide coming in and going out, it's the channels that end up getting flooded and draining. So you typically have brackish water, a mix of salty and fresh water. The next slide is going to show a close-up of this area of San Francisco Bay. So this is where the project was located. So this is Peyton Slough. Here's, if you're familiar with Golden Gate Bridge, it's located across this peninsula here. And Peyton Slough is in northern San Francisco Bay. And it's in this area that's relatively narrow where a bridge is also located. So I wanted to touch back upon that concept of tidal inundation, where one of the things to keep in mind throughout this project is trying to maintain a connection between the slough and the adjacent wetlands. That's one of the primary ecologic functions that had to be taken into account in this project. So there are a lot of different types of wetlands. So you may have heard of marshes and swamps, bogs, fens, there are a whole bunch of them. And generally, overall, a wetland is just frequently or continually inundated with water. And depending on which elevation you're at, you end up with herbaceous plants rather than woody stem plants. And so the reason I wanted to bring this up is that at Peyton Slough, we had to pay a lot of attention to the elevation and the tidal variability in order to create a habitat that was specifically targeted to one of the endangered species at the site. And this is a salt marsh harvest mouse. There are other endangered and threatened species I'll talk about later, but the salt marsh harvest mouse has very little remaining wetland habitat still existing. So the majority of this project was targeted at this, this plant here, pickleweed, because it's the habitat that the salt marsh harvest mouse needs to survive. So this whole project, this contamination started out back in the 1960s. This area in San Francisco, ore tailing, so metal ore was brought from Northern California to this location, and they actually piled up these, the ore would be the unprocessed mineral, sort of like it's pyrite or galena, depending on what's being mined. And then the tailings would be the leftover debris at the end once it's processed. So both the ores and tailings were accumulated in these three locations. And note that this is right next to San Francisco Bay, and that this is a wetland area. So you have bay mud underneath some of these ore tailings. And as a result, actually, let me show you this real quick. This is a car next to one of the buildings. This is just giving you a sense of the scale of these piles that existed there. And also with the metal ore being so dense, it's very readily wanted to sink into that bay mud. So this shows where those old ore piles were. These are the two that sunk. They're shown here in this graph by this hatched orange area. And because these ore bodies sank and they had pyrite associated with them, which has a lot of iron in it, you end up creating an environment where iron oxidizing bacteria can catalyze the reaction that liberates the sulfur from the iron sulfur bond, generating sulfuric acid. So this site already, before I even started working on it, had a groundwater pump and treat system that's operating in perpetuity, where they're extracting zinc and copper from the groundwater. And this area that you see here, this is an upland, a lot of it's fill. And so groundwater can transport very readily through this material, where when it starts to get into the wetland area, when it hits bay mud, the bay mud has a lot of clay in it. And so it doesn't allow the water to move through it very easily. So as a result, as this water moved towards, the groundwater moved towards the slough, when it hits Peyton Slough here, that groundwater ended up coming to the surface, and the sediments along Peyton Slough in some locations were actually green because of copper oxidation. So the sediments, and also the former property owner would discharge their mine waste directly into the slough. This was back before the Clean Water Act in the US, which was passed in 1972. So all of this was taking place in the 1960s. So in terms of remediating this site, dealing with the surface contamination, there are both ecosystem functions that need to be addressed, as well as urban infrastructure issues. So in terms of the ecosystem, one of the primary functions is to convey water, saline water from San Francisco Bay through into all of these marsh habitats. And you can see how degraded they are in this picture. So we ended up, because of the urbanization in this area with a bunch of stranded marsh systems. And this wetland habitat, as I mentioned, in the San Francisco Bay Area, they've lost over 90% of the wetland habitat. So the little wetlands that exist are very, very precious and important for a number of endangered and threatened species. In addition, we had the challenge of addressing urban infrastructure. This road and this railway system you see here would regularly get flooded during the wet season. And so Peyton Slough needed to be dredged on a regular basis to make sure that water could be conveyed out to San Francisco Bay to reduce flooding issues. Additionally, this marsh that's down at the bottom of the picture, they were having problems with West Nile virus at the time with a lot of mosquitoes. And one of the reasons they were having such a problem with mosquitoes in this marsh was because it had too much fresh water, because they weren't getting flushing from the brackish water, which would have eliminated the mosquito habitat. So this just gives you another image of those stranded marshes, what I'm talking about, where here's Peyton Marsh shown here. Shore Marsh is this guy over here. We have Rhodia Marsh. And then down here is McNabney Marsh, where I mentioned the issue with the mosquitoes. So because of the flood control issue, sediment from Peyton Slough was dredged on a regular basis, and that dredged material was just piled adjacent to the slough. So in this image here, this blue line is Peyton Slough. The red are the dredge piles, which have smeared onto the marsh habitat. And not only did the dredge piles introduce contaminants to the marsh habitat, they also created these berms. And so that ended up being one of the problems with connectivity, hydraulic connectivity between the slough and the adjacent wetlands is during high tide, you want to top the berm. In addition to the berms, there were also issues with topography. You can see a lot of the area that doesn't have vegetation. A lot of that was driven by the fact it was too high, so it wasn't getting inundated when the slough would flood. And additionally, there were these shallow pipelines and a narrow railroad culvert, which slowed down the flow of water. So there was a lot of sedimentation and vegetation growth that would occur through here. So a number of obstacles to tidal exchange. So additional challenges, trying to figure out who's going to pay for it is often a problem. It took a while before the company that owned the property stepped up and accepted the fact they were going to be spending tens of millions of dollars. It was a pretty hard thing for them to come to terms with. Also trying to figure out where the contamination boundaries are. There's a lot of negotiating that goes on between resource agencies and the responsible party. As we've been talking about, maintaining or actually reintroducing slough and marsh functions. The remediation plan had to be viable, and meaning that it needed to be able to be accomplished in a relatively short amount of time, and it needed to have a good probability of long-term success. There were tons of permits and meetings that had to take place. The construction was amazing. At the end, I'll show you some photos. And then also coming to consensus on how are you going to define success? So the two remediation designs that were considered, the standard is this idea of dredging and capping, where you would remove the contaminated sediment, usually about 3 to 4 feet. You place clean fill on top of it. The issue with Peyton Slough, because it's tidally inundated, you have water moving through it on a regular basis. And as I mentioned, it needs to be dredged occasionally. So there was a lot of concern that an engineered cap would not be able to retain its integrity given the dredging and the storm and tidal influences there. So what was decided upon was to excavate an entire new slough alignment using that bay mud property that I mentioned, where it has a low hydraulic conductivity, so that groundwater can't move through it very easily. So essentially this bay mud acting as almost like a clay groundwater cutoff wall. So this is what another view of the new alignment here, and then Waterfront Road that I mentioned that ends up flooding on a regular basis. So the company ended up having to not only remediate the site, but any wetland that they had a footprint on. They also had to mitigate for that. So they put a lot of effort into reducing their footprint on this marsh habitat. So they used an already existing drainage first off to create the new slough. And then this is what that final channel would end up looking like. And note that they also created more drainages and more sinuosity, so that enhanced the habitat. And this is what I talked about with this road construction. The way that they ended up, one of the key ways they reduced their footprint on the marsh was they constructed the road directly on the future slough alignment. So you can see them here laying down tarp, and then they're putting gravel and dirt as the roadway to allow heavy equipment to drive on it. And then here's a view of that road being constructed. And then finally, they ended up excavating backwards, so you can see that slough now starting to fill in. And so as a result, they didn't have any footprint on the side of the slough. And then this is what when they finally had the new alignment completed, here it is functioning. The next thing that they had to do was now they needed to address the old slough. So the first thing was that they needed to remove all those dredge piles that existed along the side of the slough. And here's an image of what that looked like as they scalloped it out. And then they had to fill it back in, capping the existing slough in the dredge piles, and then restoring all that area back to wetland habitat. And so here this is showing the engineered cap here. And note again that this is an engineered cap, but since it's not the channel anymore, it doesn't need to be dredged. And then the vegetated dredge piles here. And as I mentioned, there were a number of threatened and endangered species. In addition to the salt marsh harvest mouse, there were the clapper whales, an endangered bird. So as they constructed this roadway, they had to have people with fans out in front trying to get animals to get out of the roadway construction area. Also, they had to use nets to get fish out of the slough before they capped it. The Sacramento splittails, another endangered species that was at this site. We also had threatened plant species, so those had to be relocated during the construction as well. So there were a number of additional challenges that went into the project to address endangered and threatened species. And this is aerial view. So here's 2005. This was just after the project was completed. You can see the new slough here. The old sloughs now capped and the dredge piles were removed. And you can see now vegetation starting to come back. And then here in 2015, the footprint of the old slough is actually kind of difficult to see. So the benefits: it reduced the contamination, improved hydraulic connection between the slough and the marsh habitats. They increased both the size and the sinuosity of the slough and added more side channels. So that created more refuge for example, for small fish that are growing that need to escape predators. And the project actually ended up creating over 5 acres of new marsh habitat, and also enhanced flood control and mosquito control. In the interest of time, I'm not introducing the tide gate feature, but they also installed a very high-end tide gate to enhance flooding to that the McNabney Marsh. The 10-year monitoring plan included looking at sediment, the water column, and groundwater for contaminants of concern, so copper, zinc, and pH. And they put in groundwater walls 2 between it. So this would have been the sentry wall here. So if this first one gets a hit, then that gives them a little bit of time to try to find a remediation, a way to reduce the impact if the sentry well ends up showing contamination. Also, with respect to habitat, they ended up looking at hydrology, how much sedimentation was taking place in the slough, and also the type of vegetation that was there. I can't see my clock, so I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but so I guess I'll go ahead and wrap up here and take questions.
Any question? Just so everybody know, a lot of people are mute already. So if you have a quick question, you can unmute yourself and then ask the question. Okay.
All right, pass it off to Kuria. Good to see you, by the way.
Yeah, I think there might be a question at some point, but I think maybe we can leave that up to the end of the talk so that there will be time to get through everything. Yes. Okay. Kuria, can you grab the screen now?
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
Why Korea is doing that? I just want to mention Priya, that's fantastic pictures and talks that you give there. By the way, this is more of a comment than a question. This is really because I come from Nigeria, and I know from the southwestern part of Nigeria, there's a lot of contamination issues that we have. Of course, there is not so much awareness as to how ocean water get into the land and all these things affect ecosystem and all that stuff around. But I remember there was a time recently that there was an oil spill in the Niger Delta area that even though I think it was at the scale of the one that happened in the Gulf region during that period, but there was layers of attention to it, and that ended up devastating a lot of the local economy in that region, including the fish in the water and even I believe some of the life, the birds around the region also suffered as a process. So I think this is a very important point, and of course the shedding the light in the way that you've done for at least even for the region of San Francisco is definitely useful knowledge to have. So thank you. Just want to put that out here. I don't know, Kuria, how are you doing with that? I don't know if I can help from my hand here. Is there anything I can do?
Yeah, every time I hit share, I keep getting these open system preferences, and I can see that PowerPoint is allowed, but it doesn't seem, I don't know.
If you want to send your slides, I can share that with people on my hand, so that you can just be talking and I'll be scrolling through it for you, if that's easier.
What do you mean? Send?
If you can send your slides to me now, I can just do the sharing for you, and you just be talking through it.
Oh, okay. So you mean I send you the
by email? Yes.
The whole PowerPoint.
Yes, if you can.
Oh, I'll try that. Okay.
In the meantime, is there one question for Korea? Priya, excuse me. Why Korea is trying to sort this out?
One comment that I can make from my own perspective, I had just been in school before I started that job at the water board, and I had no concept at the time how much contamination was out there. Yeah. And so I'd never been introduced to this concept of managing contamination in place. That was an entirely new idea. In my young mind, I had this idea that if you had contamination, and you would scoop it all up and you'd go put it somewhere. And I never thought where that somewhere was. And financially, it's really impractical to move hazardous waste. And you also run the risk of then transferring that contamination to more places. So to the extent possible, resource agencies always try to manage the contamination in place, keep it from going anywhere else.
Yeah. So I understand, of course, there is obvious well-structured organizations around keeping the contamination in place, like you mentioned here. But I wonder, are you aware of probably being able to study any possible contamination that's happened across anywhere in Africa or somewhere else outside of the United States?
I unfortunately haven't had the opportunity to do much work abroad, but one of my colleagues, Kingsley Odigie, he did work in Lake Tanganyika looking at the impact of wildfires in the history in that area, and was able to document various time periods of with agriculture and with European settlement. So different things that took place within that watershed being documented in the lake sediment.
Okay, I see that Oluwaseyi Franklin raised up his hand. I wonder if he has any question. Do you have any question?
All right, sir, we have a question. Thank you very much.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so we have postgraduate students from Federal University of Technology, Akure, Nigeria chapter. So we had issues with connecting while the lecture was going on. So we want to ask if there's a provision for us to get the slide and then the rundown of the lecture after.
Yeah, I'll send Greg a PDF of the presentation, and I think also they're going to post it on YouTube as well.
Yes, so we're going to post the video of this conversation on YouTube after the talk. We're also going to put the slide on our website, www.eswb.com. So you can go there and you see a link to the slides shortly after the talk.
All right, thank you very much.
Perfect. .org.
Hey, over here, can we ask a little bit more? I was done the water sampling and I didn't understand completely. How did you see the contamination in the water?
Okay, let me go ahead and pull the...
So you collected some water samples over the years and then you just run normal analysis and
yes, originally when I'm not sure what was going on in the 1970s. I assume that the property, when the company Rhodia purchased it from the former mining company, that I assume that after the Clean Water Act, there was probably a general evaluation of water quality in the area, which would have put this site on the radar. And so there would have been water samples collected and sediment samples collected. During the project, they also did toxicity tests as well on organisms. So there were a number of analyses and field work that was completed. And since I was working for the resource agency, all of that field work was completed by consultants. Where now that I'm back in academia, like working with Greg, he's the one who's going out and we're collecting samples together. So it's very, very different. That was another interesting learning experience for me, is not being the person actually collecting the data and analyzing the samples.
Okay, I just want to know, Kuria sent out an email to me and or Greg. I'm not sure who got it, but Greg, can you quickly check your email to see if you'll be able to do these slides for us? I think he said he sent it, but I can't find it in my email.
Yeah, I'll check right now.
Maybe he sent it to you. All right, so in the meantime, I think, Kuria, you can take it over and start talking about it while either of us, Greg or me, sees the slides, so we can put it up in the meantime.
I'll just send it to Greg. I only sent it to you.
Okay. I didn't get it.
Okay, just one last question about contamination and pollution.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think we always have the idea that when we talk about contamination and pollution, we always look at it at big urbanization areas and big scales. Have you had any opportunity to go down to the rural areas to really look at what contamination can be in a very small scale? Because we tried we were just trying to look at one tiny village in a rural area in one local part in town, just get out the plastics from the local villages, and we were amazed by just how much plastic pollution there was out there. So are you can you localize that and put that to rural scale and see how much contamination is there?
Was that a question for Kuria, since he's doing research in plastics? Or are you actually, I guess, no, sorry, somebody else I know. Sorry, was that a question for me or Kuria?
Yeah, just look at the scale of pollution and contamination. Did you, how low do you go to your scale where you try to assess contamination and pollution?
Oh, in terms of like how low to go for cleanup?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. So that was a huge battle as well. There are a number of different criteria that can be used based on toxicity tests that are done in laboratories using organisms. And there was some of the resource agencies were fighting for getting to very, very low concentrations. But my boss at the Water Board, I learned a lot from this as well, as he was very practical, and he knew that this was in a highly contaminated area surrounded by refineries. You can't clean it up cleaner than the surrounding area. You're wasting energy and resources by doing that. It's just going to get recontaminated. So we ended up not going to the lowest level, but talking a lot with the various resource agencies and the dischargers to come to a compromise on what would be acceptable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if
Please, I have a question.
okay, me, can you go ahead while we're waiting for Kuria? Kuria, please let us know when if everything is done. Let us know, please.
Yeah, so I just sent up the file to Greg.
Okay, Greg, let us know when you get it. In the meantime, Nee, can you go ahead with your question?
Or Kuria, do you want to start telling us about Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm having two questions from this end, and it's as regards then, because what the presenter just gave us is a very interesting aspect that, and as Dr. Adeyemi had said, is very important in this part of the country, of the world, that's Nigeria. And there are some of our students that are working in the area.
Oh, sorry, it's cutting out.
Yeah, this is it's usually a problem. The connectivity is not as good. I think what you can do, Mr. Nee, if you can hear me later on, is to type your
ornithology. That's an
Okay, Mr. Nee, there's a problem with your internet connection. Can you type the question and I'll help you ask the question here. If you can type it, and then I'll ask.
okay.
But in the meantime, can you
okay, noted. Noted.
Sorry, we're having a hard time understanding. It's cutting out a lot, so we can't hear your question.
Yes, it's usually part of the problem that we have. The internet connection from that part of the world is not that strong. So I've just informed him, Mr. Nee, you can also hear me. Type the question in the chat section, and then I'll have.
I have a question. I have a question.
Okay, hold on a second. We're going to have the question after the talk, okay? If that's okay.
Hello.
Hello, let's have the question after Kuria's talk, okay? Thank you. Or you can type it in the chat in the meantime. Kuria, can you take it away, please?
Okay.
And I have the slides too. So.
Oh, Greg, that is the wrong. Maybe I sent you the wrong presentation.
I'm gonna share it. Don't worry, I have it. But go ahead while you're talking in the meantime. Yeah.
Yeah. So my talk today was gonna be on potentially polluting shipwrecks and that is a big problem. And what I mean by polluting shipwrecks are these ships that were sunk mostly during the Second World War, and they are lying in all over most of the coastal regions in most countries, especially in Europe, also in the Pacific, and just outside the US and most other countries. And the biggest problem is usually that they contain a lot of oil, petroleum oil, and then over the years, of course, then that oil starts leaking. But on Norwegian waters, we have a special case in that in addition to oil, we also have one wreck that has more than 60 tons of mercury that was sunk during the Second World War. And so my talk tonight was going to be about the remediation work and, that we've been doing there to try and monitor the spread of mercury and what we're going to do with that site and all that. So I don't know how we're going to go about this because
Can you see my slide, my page?
Let me just go back to Zoom.
Yeah, can everybody see what I'm sharing? If that's the case, then I can help you with the slide.
I think oh, can you go to the first slide? I see, because it looks like I sent you the wrong file.
This is the first slide.
I can't see your screen though.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you see my screen now? Can you see my screen?
No.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see your screen now. Oh, so that's the wrong file. I'm very sorry. But I've sent the right one.
One second, let me see the other one. I got the same thing twice. So I mean, it looks like it has all the rec site that you were talking about, but I'm not sure if it's the one you want to talk about.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm gonna send you the right one now.
Okay.
That was my mistake. I'm very sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. In the meantime, if anybody have any question, that we can try to take that in before we go ahead. I know some people will have some questions. If there's any question, let me know. You can unmute yourself as usual. I think if you're talking and you don't know you're already muted, please unmute yourself. Your computer may be muted, or your phone. Okay.
So you should have it in a minute.
Okay. Can you keep talking about it in the meantime?
Oh yeah. So yeah. So yeah. So as I was saying, the polluting shipwrecks that mostly with oil that were sunk during the Second World War are quite a problem in most coastal regions. And as I was saying, we have about more than 20 on the Norwegian coast itself. But the biggest problem is the one that I said that has 60 tons of mercury. And to give a brief history of these, what happened is that, as you know, during the war, Norway, like a lot of other European countries, was occupied by the Germans. And the Japanese were allied to the Germans, as you know. So this ship was carrying mercury that was gonna be used in the war activities. I think they used it to make grenades. I mean, and so it was on its way from Germany to Japan, but then it developed problems, and then it came to Norway, and then to be repaired, and then on its way back, a British submarine detected it, and they sank it. So they knew the wreck was sunk somewhere around near Norway, but they didn't know where until 2003, when they were able to find it, to locate the wreck. So what they did, of course, the first thing they did was to map the extent of mercury, how it has spread, and to see what could be done about it. And it turned out that the wreck had been split into two, and the mercury was in canisters of steel, not plastic. So in the last 70 years since this happened, then that mercury has spread on the seafloor at about 150 meters, and covered an area of about 100 square meters of the seafloor. So this is not a big problem in terms of contamination of the food, in terms of fish, because the monitoring that has been done there has shown that the levels of mercury in fish around there are not higher than anywhere else. But as you can understand, I mean, the people, because this wreck is near an island, so the people living around there are not very comfortable with the idea of that wreck with all that mercury around there. So there have been a lot of projects that the Norwegian Institute for Water Research, where I work, is that been involved on since the last 16 years, since 2003, which started with mapping out that area, as I said, and then trying to see if there has been any spread of the mercury. And the last project that was there about 3 years ago was about, because the two wrecks are not on a flat seafloor. One of them is on a sliding valley, on top of a valley that is about 20 to 50 meters. So there's worry that it might roll over and slide and pour off. Remember that there's still a lot of mercury in these steel canisters that is still in the submarine. So the last task that we were involved in was that they wanted to level the ground, fill that valley near where in the seafloor, so that there's little risk of this part of the wreck from rolling over. So our work as an environmental chemist there was to make sure that the mercury did not spread beyond this area. And that is a rather unique. The only thing to say about that now is that the Norwegian Coastal Administration has not still yet made a decision on whether they should cover the whole place or remove the wreck and top the whole place with gravel and sand. I don't know what else to say, because I tried to send the file now, and then I got a message that it's too big.
Yeah.
But one thing we could also do is that if you show the movie Greg that I sent you, one of them, I think it gives you a good idea of what I'm talking, and then I can talk a bit about it. And then, of course, I'll send you all these slides.
Yeah, so that was what I'm about to say, actually, that that's actually okay. Even if you're not able to go through it, it's a good thing that we're going to have the slides. So we can also make that available to everybody. And if there are, say, any more specific questions that also had to do with maybe some technicality of it, those questions can be directed to you also via email. So,
oh yeah, I'm happy to receive any.
So I think it's okay. No, yeah, I think it's fine. Great.
Yeah, I'm very sorry that this happened, because it's the first time I'm using Zoom, and
yes,
And,
Yeah, I understand this. The other thing is complicated too. I mean, I also have to learn how to deal with it, so I understand. So don't feel bad about it at all. Thank you.
And then I can do that, and if there's also more interest, I can give the talk also the next time. I mean, some other time. I mean, also, I mean, when I've done better homework on how to get this.
I have a question.
Okay, can you go ahead? Maybe we can take questions and you can, just answer them a lot.
Especially if, because Greg had posted some links there, and if anybody has watched that and has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay.
Can I go ahead?
Yes. Yeah. Who is talking? Please introduce yourself and then your question.
Okay, I'm Ibrahim Perisi, and I'm joining this meeting from Warri, that's Nigeria.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kuria. My question, okay, my area of research is ecotoxicology and remediation studies. And sadly, I came late because I just left the departmental board meeting where we are considering results. So I couldn't get most of the first presentation. Okay, but let me ask you some of the question. I just need some clarification. You said the assessment you did on the site, it shows that the level of mercury, it's not different from any other level. I want to ask, is it benthic organism? The assessment you did, was it on benthic organisms or was it on fishes? Because why I'm asking, because if you use fishes and some other species, they are very mobile. So it may not give a good picture of the level of mercury toxicity in that region. But when you use a lot of benthic organisms and maybe you sample sediments, it will give you a fair level of mercury contamination in that area. So that's my first question. Do you use benthic assessment or using fishes and other migratory or very mobile organisms?
Okay, thanks. So, as I said, I mean, the wreck was they discovered it in 2003, so that's about 16 years ago. And since then, there's been monitoring of, we've taken, first of all, sediments from the site going all the way to about, I think the original indication was that the area that is contaminated with mercury on the ground, on the sediment floor, is about a radius of 100 meters around that.
Okay.
And that is all in the presentation. You can see all that, whatever. And then beyond 100 meters, the level of mercury was not different from 2 or 1 kilometer from that. Then what they have also been doing is that the fisheries department has been taking fish around that area and comparing it with all the other levels of mercury in fish in all over Norway, and they have not found any significant difference in the concentrations. So remember, these wreck is in 150 to 200 meters on the seafloor. So the extent is very localized, if we can say that, has been very localized. So because, and then of course you can imagine fish is the most important because, like you mentioned, they are swimming from different places, but there hasn't been any since then, and they continue to do that every year for the last 16 years, and they have not seen any effect of increased mercury in fish from this. So it's more of a psychological this concern that this is a fishing nation also. So although you don't get any fish, just that idea that there's that much mercury lying there is, just disturbing rather than a health risk.
Yeah, this is very nice. Actually didn't know that Abraham is actually working on an area that is very close to the talk that you just gave today. So, I think a good follow up might be that if you send maybe a specific email to kind of continue to also make find ways of potential collaboration along that line. So, that's great. I wonder if we can take a couple of more questions.
Okay, hello, Dr. Yemi.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, Mr. Niyi, go ahead.
Okay, I thank you for the presentation, both presenter. I really appreciate it because this is an area of interest some of our students are trying to look at in most protected areas in Nigeria. For instance, we have a PhD student working on the issue of gold mining in Zamfara State. As we have known, in past few years, there was a lead poisoning in that region of the country. So I would really appreciate, and some of us are also working on the cement industry, Ewekoro, and how the effluents are affecting the white animals, most especially the bush meat consumption. We've discovered from research that is affecting the livelihood. Some companies are around our protected areas, and there are some effluents that are entering into these protected areas. And we've seen the detrimental effect on the white animals and on the aquatic plants. Now, my own interest is some of these students need standard labs to go ahead, most especially people that just concluded their masters in this aspect of remediation as regards ornithology and wildlife management. I wouldn't know how you can be of assistance to us on having links so that they can go ahead and learn more about this, because we discovered when we are treating these things in the department, we are always hooked up because there are depth information and lack of skills in this area. So that's my request. We need a list, if possible, sir, on likely places where these people can further and learn more, especially as it comes to wildlife management and bushmeat control.
I think there are maybe two layers of questions that you have there. I wonder if Kuria wants to speak to any of them.
I'm just wondering what is the question about the possibilities of the student continuing research after graduate.
Yes.
I didn't get the question.
Yes, the possibility for them to continue their research. Most of them are postgraduate students, master's level, and they are moving ahead for their PhD. And we have such research gap in this part of the world, especially in our protected areas. So is there any opportunity for them to further in this area of research?
Oh yeah, that is, I mean, so what I can say is that I work for the Norwegian Institute of Water Research. So we don't offer degrees. So but we have students that are affiliated with other universities, for example, Oslo University. The only thing I can think of is that in most cases, not every time, but mostly when there is a PhD student, a position, they're usually advertising them. So I can only encourage you, the students to apply. And not just here, that's quite common. But we, as the Norwegian Institute, we don't offer any degrees.
Okay, yes, thank you for that. Yeah, just to speak a little bit to your question, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities online for PhD in this area. Of course, we hopefully in future will be able to be sending those ones that we come across to people like the students that you're mentioning, or put it up somewhere on our website where people will be able to access them easily. But I think in general, I think you can, if there's a student in this particular area or line of research that is interested in applying for a PhD, I think a good thing for you would be to just look for the universities that you're interested in, look for the person that you're interested in working on. And if there are any specific question as to how maybe someone within this program can help you put together maybe some kind of research window, or look over your document that you've written, that you can perhaps, I don't know if Kuria will be interested in maybe helping to look over some of your research ideas and maybe help you fine tune that. But as far as the application itself is concerned for PhDs, things like that, I think it would be useful for you to look online yourself. And if we see any information as well, of course, we'll be sending it out to everybody. Yes, so that I think that's what we can say about that.
If I may interject a little bit as well.
Yes.
So I was going to say we have WhatsApp as well. If you link in to that and let people know exactly what you are interested in. So I think you mentioned remediation in the chat. You also mentioned, I think, wildlife management and was it bushmeat control? If you state exactly what it is that you're interested in, it's possible that we may be able to search out PhD programs that would correspond to your interests. But yeah, I think the whole idea is maybe in the future on the website, we could start providing links to everybody so that they could track down potential PhD programs or master's programs, or just, moving the next step forward. But yeah, that is definitely in the future at this point. Right now, the easiest way would probably be asking through WhatsApp.
That's a great point. Yeah. So, any other question?
Yes, I have I don't know if I should say a question or a comment towards Dr. Priya. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Priya, for your presentation. Although I came a little bit late, so I couldn't really get a grasp of what she was trying to explain at the site. But the little I understand, it's about contamination and remediation. But I couldn't get the kind of concept used for the remediation or cleanup. So I don't know. The few slides I saw, maybe I'll be able to do some questions to her through email. But in summary, what I want to say, that's actually my area. I'm just completing my PhD in environmental management, where I use phytoremediation for Kuria species. So I really love to interact with Dr. Priya if she will have the opportunity to accept, like sending her an email and getting to know her and talking more in that area, because I'm interested in doing a postdoc in an area of any novel area of remediation. So I don't know if he's here and can make one comment or two about that.
So I can comment on this. Actually, I think Priya had to step out for another meeting, but okay. I'm her current graduate student at Cal State Northridge, and so I'm more than willing to pass along. I'm more than willing to connect you with her, and I'm sure that she'd be willing to speak with you about that. And also her, okay. Yeah, like postdoc that she did at Woods Hole, and she also did another one. That's Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. She also did another postdoc at UC Irvine. So I think that she'd be able to speak with you a little bit more about potential postdocs in the near future. So if you want to individually message me, you're welcome to do that. I think that we may also have a link on the website to both Priya and Dr. Ndungu as well.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add that. So on the slide that on the talk that I sent, I have at the end there I have a website for NIVA, I mean the Norwegian Institute for Water Research. And we also host postdocs, and every time we have an opening, we advertise it there. So you can also.
Okay, wow, that's fantastic.
So
okay, I will check.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right, great. Any question? Bastien, I'm not sure if any of your students have questions there. Any other question? All right, feel free to ask a question if you must. Okay.
Let's go and speak. We have a question here. Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question in connection with the first presentation. You mentioned that one of the tailings sank. So I would like to ask if there were any impacts that they noticed in connection with that.
Sorry, I didn't get that. I'm not sure if Kuria also get that.
No, I didn't get it. I was gonna ask you if you got it.
I didn't get it. Can you repeat the question if you can?
I'm asking if okay. The first presenter mentioned that one of the ores or tailings sank, one of the 3 ores or tailings, that they sank. So I'm asking if there were any specific impacts that they noticed in connection with that, specific with that.
What were the specific impacts?
Yeah, specific. Greg, did you get it? Bastien, can you repeat it? I think you.
The question is about the first talk, and it was not clear actually what was the level of contamination, what was the link between the pile and the water. So it was a very nice study, and I appreciate the question. But it was not the science behind was not very well developed.
Yeah.
I don't know if, because the presenter is not here, I don't know if she can add a little bit more information on her slides about all this science that is behind. That's what we are doing here, and that's what we want to know about. Is
I see. Yeah.
How did you measure it, and how much did you measure? And
I see. Yeah. So definitely that kind of question, I think. I don't know if Greg can take it, but it might be also be useful to kind of send her an email directly. But of course, because this is a general talk, I think she's tried to make it as generalistic as possible, so that everybody will be able to understand, including postdocs like that are also in that field. Somebody like me, for example, I'm not in that field, and I still was able to understand. So I think she did a great job in trying to make that happen. But as far as the science and the methodology behind it may be concerned, you may have to probably contact her in person. I don't know if Greg has something to say about that as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you're asking for specific quantities that were measured, and I'm sure that Priya could provide those to you. I think that in the interest of time, she had shortened the lecture. So yeah, I think
if some of us would be interested, it would be good if she published a paper and that this study would be published, that we could have a version of the study as a publication, so that we can go through it and appreciate the work.
Sure. Yeah. So if I'll make sure to ask her if there are any links to the study itself, because it's through like a state agency. It's possible that it won't be found in the same way on like Google Scholar. It might instead be found by going to the actual state agency itself. So I'll ask her about that and make sure to send it to you guys if I find it.
Well, yeah. So what I can add on that, Greg, is that So in the talk that you probably Adeyemi is going to put on, is, yeah, I have the references and also to including the link to the NIVA website where we have all reports, because we don't always publish it. There are 2 publications on the talk that I was gonna give, and they are there, but we also have reports on other remediation work and all that we do in there. So if you go in there, you can download them, and on many other environmental remediation projects that we take here.
Any other question? All right. I want to thank I think if there's no other question, just any other question before I go to the next item on the list. Yeah. Okay. Unmute yourself if you're asking a question. It looks like she is asking a question, or someone in the Shei's group. Yeah, can you unmute yourself? It looks like someone in Shei's group is trying to ask the question. Can you unmute? I still can't hear you. All right. I'm not sure if you have a question or it's just. All right. Okay, I don't think they have a question. Anyway, yeah, so I think we actually went over time a little bit, but all in all, I think it's been a useful and a very exciting talk and conversation. So I want to thank everybody that participated, including those that have already left the group. It's really a very nice meeting. Just one final note is that go on our website and look at, you're probably going to find this the link to this as well as the YouTube. I'm going to try and post it up as soon as I can. But if you can't find it immediately now, you can check back later in time. And I also want to encourage everybody to go check up our website. As I mentioned earlier, it's ESWB.org. And we're going to try and send up a follow-up email at the end of the day as well. So thank you, Kuria, for taking the time to speak to us today. It's a pleasure to get to know you, and I'm sorry that everything didn't work out well, but I hope that people is gonna look at the slides and also the videos and talk and probably send you an email with question. And if you get any question as well, we'll sure know to forward it to you. So thank you very much.
Oh, my apologies, and thank you for the invitation. I hope to do much better next time.
Well, if you're willing, we can always have you back next time if you want to. That would be great. But no problem at all. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Bastien, for joining, and everybody within basket groups. Thank you, people in Oluwaseyi's group too. You guys, I know your connection has been a little tight there. I think if there are other people that are also online that may not be having the video, Greg, Chege, Amos, Defo. Sorry, we were unable to do a lot of introduction. Abraham and Roy. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And Yemi as well. So thank you, everybody, and I hope to see you some other time.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Send us an email if you have any question, or WhatsApp, or go to our website if you have any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yemi.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Greg, should we wait a little to talk, or should, let me